Hi, folks. This is Pete McGuinness, one of the co-hosts of the Jazz Room concert series here at William Paterson University. And you are welcome to the Sittin' In portion of today's performance. This is the Q&A session with the guest artist. And today I am very happy to be sitting in, as you are, with our guest artist for this afternoon, Mr. Ed Neumeister. Ed is a renowned jazz trombonist, composer, arranger, conductor, and educator, oftentimes doing all of those things simultaneously, which is remarkable. This is a person who wears many hats and wears them extremely well. He is bringing to the Jazz Room concert today a quintet, a five-piece group with himself on trombone, Jay Clayton as the vocalist with the group, Gary Versace on the piano, Drew Gress on bass, and Tom Rainey on the drums. Ed Neumeister is renowned as, like I said, many things: jazz trombonist, nationally known, internationally known, composer, arranger. Many of you may know of Ed's, many of you New York area may know Ed's career as from his tenure with the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra, many years playing in the trombone section and as a contributing composer, arranger to Mel's band. Of course, the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra was formerly known as the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, and now is simply known as the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra. Monday nights at the Vanguard. Of course, when the world comes back around, that will be happening again, of course. Ed is known for many things, like I said, in the United States and also in Europe. He was very renowned as a trombonist, composer in Europe, and principally as the professor of jazz trombone at the conservatory in Graz, Austria. For many years was one of the professors on their faculty, probably the finest jazz program in all of Europe. But now he's back in the United States, and we're very proud to say that Ed is now on our faculty once again. He was on the faculty at William Paterson University years ago, and now is back, and he's in our graduate program teaching composing and arranging and for the master's students, but also teaching the combos as well. I'd like to welcome Ed Neumeister to Jazz Room and to Sittin' In. Hi, Ed.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, man. You and I go back a fair number of years as
Sure do.
fellow trombone players in New York City. I was a freelance trombonist for many years in New York City, and we've done a number of gigs together. I've always been a fan of your playing. I've always admired you greatly, and initially as a trombone player, because everybody knew about your wonderful trombone playing. And then later, as I got into writing, I understood some things about your composing, arranging. So Ed, you were not born in California, I don't think, but your formative years were in the San Francisco Bay Area when you were studying and getting into the scene and becoming a musician as a young person before you came to New York. Can you tell us a few things about those years?
Well, yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area. Fremont actually is a suburb of San Francisco. Yeah, the real early days of my musical experience, I played in a marching band, a private marching band in Oakland, California. And I started when I was 9 in that band. And the great thing about that band was we played from Saturday, every Saturday, from more or less 9 in the morning till 9 at night. Rehearsing, of course, there were breaks and other things to do, but it was a great experience for me. And we went on the road too. We played a lot of parades, Disneyland, Chinese New Year's in San Francisco and Santa Cruz. And so that was really the beginning of my musical career. At the time, you know, we used to travel in Greyhound buses. And, I thought that the smell of the diesel fuel from the Greyhound bus was really romantic. It's like, I'm going on the road.
On the road, the smell of on the road, exactly.
Yeah, the smell of the road.
I remember that, yeah.
But then, by the time I was 12 or 13, I was playing in what they called the stage band. So as you got to the top, I think there was like 12 or 14 trombone players. So once you're in the top 4, you start playing in the stage band. Yeah, the lessons were always on Thursday nights, so you had private lessons and then ensembles and the stage band, and then the marching band was on Saturday. And that brought me into jazz, although nobody really called it jazz. It's interesting, but we played the music of Count Basie and Stan Kenton and Woody Herman. And by the time I was 12 or 13, I was playing first trombone. And one of the jobs of the first trombonist in this stage band was to play transcriptions of J.J. Johnson solos.
I went to a good school, my goodness.
So they just gave me, I didn't know who J.J. Johnson was. They just gave me the solo and said, learn it, you know.
Wow.
And so one of my little claim to fame as a youngster was because we played the Oakland Raiders and the San Francisco 49ers. We played a lot of their halftime shows. And that was back in the day when they actually televised the halftime show. But we played every Oakland Raiders halftime show when they played in town. And at the very, very first football game at the Oakland Coliseum, we played the halftime show. But part of that show was the band marched to the center of the field, and then I came to the front of the band, and me and a tuba and an accordion, and I played J.J. Johnson's solo of Mac the Knife.
Oh my God! Wow.
I've been looking for that recording to try to find it. I even had my parents searching for it. They called the Raiders, they called the TV show, that just somehow never could get it. That would be great to find now.
Of you
Anyway.
playing, I got a video of you playing that out on the field with an accordion and a tuba. That's wild.
Yeah, somewhere it exists if they keep those archives. I could, not that I looked that hard, but my parents did. They looked around and called the TV stations and called the Oakland Raiders organization. And everybody said, yeah, call. The Raiders said, call the TV station. The TV station said, call the Raiders. And then when I was 15, there was a group of us, 8 of us to be exact, that quit the marching band on the same day and joined the Musicians Union, Local 6 in San Francisco, and started doing gigs. So I started working professionally when I was 15 and doing union gigs. And that was sort of the beginning of my professional career, professional life.
Do you remember how people heard about your abilities, so you started getting gigs? Were you sitting in places, or your reputation just started getting out there, or maybe your friends helped you out?
Well, this was still when I was a teenager, so all my connections were through that one band.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to school at San Jose State for 3 years. I had a great trombone teacher named Bob Zabel. And the jazz bit, there was no jazz department per se, but there was a jazz big band. Mm-hmm. And we played the music of Don Ellis. We even played some J.J. Charts,
Mm-hmm.
Camino Real.
Right.
And also some more open kind of free things. We did Terry Riley's in C with the big band.
Oh, really? Wow.
So I had a chance to blow a lot. And same thing when I was still in high school. I was playing a lot of rock bands. And so I was busy, busy playing between the marching band and then doing these gigs, mostly on the weekends. Mm-hmm. Then this was during the Watergate days and the Vietnam War. I lucked out because of my draft number was high, so I didn't get drafted. I had already decided I would not go if I was drafted. But I did, I got so fed up with politics in the United States, I bought a one-way ticket to Paris when I was 21 years old. And I ended up living in Amsterdam for a couple of years.
How old were you now at this point?
21.
21, okay.
In Amsterdam, I played in a lot of different, I got on the scene basically in Amsterdam and played a lot. Lived in my Volkswagen van for 3 months, just practicing, sitting in my van practicing, but I worked in a kitchen in a restaurant where I cooked breakfasts so I could basically eat for free. And I could take showers there it was like a hostel, youth hostel with a big room with a bunch of beds. And then I eventually moved to what's called a cracked house. It was an old factory. It was up on the 6th floor, architect studio, rent-free, but no electricity. So I had to carry these heavy propane tanks up 6 flights of stairs, and that was my light. I had these propane lights and heating. But I could practice basically around the clock, so that's what I did. I just practiced every night until the sun came up. And still doing little gigs. They were good gigs, though. I played with Paul Gonzalez. They brought him over, and we did a tour. It was actually his very last 3 or 4 gigs, 5 gigs. Played a lot of Latin music, a lot of like Afro-Cuban, and studied and listened and was getting really more and more into jazz at that point. So that was my early 20s. And I realized at a certain point, though, I was basically the best musician in all the different bands I was playing in, or at least one of the best. So I decided it was time to move back to the States. And I came back and I studied with a guy named Mitchell Ross, who was also one of Joe Alessi's teachers in San Francisco. And it was actually through Mitchell that I started working in the classical arena, shall we say.
I forgot to mention that you've been active as a classical trombonist as well as a jazz trombonist, right?
Yeah, I actually replaced Joe Alessi in the San Francisco Ballet when
That's
he
pretty
was
serious.
Curtis. And I played in the San Francisco Opera as an extra, and then I won the principal trombone in Sacramento Symphony.
Wow.
So I was, super busy. I was playing Sacramento Symphony, first trombone. I was playing the Circle Star Theater, first trombone, where we backed up Sinatra for a week, and then we would back up Ella Fitzgerald for a week, and then Sarah Vaughan, and then Nancy Wilson, and then Dionne Warwick, and on and on and on. That was a great gig, too, really incredible. At the same time, I was playing with local great jazz players, a guy named Noel Jukes, Mark Levine, who's famous from his educational books, but also a really great pianist.
Right, sure.
And that's when I started my quartet, my first quartet. And that was kind of like 74 to 80, where I was on the scene in San Francisco. And I kind of learned later, actually Michael Davis told me this, because Michael's younger, so he's coming up behind me. He said, at the time, I was known for a guy that could do everything. I didn't know. I just thought that was what you were supposed to do.
Right. I understand that.
But, I moved to New York in 1980, and I actually started to feel schizophrenic. But, playing like an avant-garde jazz gig and then some kind of Latin gig and then go and play Brahms, and I didn't feel so secure with everything. And I also realized that the classical world was not really my world. That wasn't the thing I wanted to pursue. I was more interested in being a creative musician and being a jazz player. So I moved to New York as a jazz player. And then later in New York, people heard me play classical through chamber music. And so I ended up doing a lot of classical gigs in New York, too. So that's kind of the transition from San Francisco into New York.
I remember one gig you and I did together. We've done a few over the years, but years ago, almost 30 years ago, you and I were in the trombone section together. I think I was filling in for somebody at Lincoln Center. We were doing Gershwin's piano concerto. And this was at Lincoln Center somewhere, and I forgot the woman's name who was playing the piano. And it was full of like this mishmash. It was called Concordia, was the name of the orchestra. And I think it was like a mishmash of jazz-oriented players and New York Philharmonic players. Like Ray Mace was playing trumpet on the one hand, and then Jim Pugh was playing trombone one on the other hand. So you had this funny mishmash of players who had kind of a foot in two worlds at the same time. I remember enjoying that and sitting next to you doing that years ago. Yeah.
I played in Concordia for several years, so that was one of my regular things. It was me and Jim Pugh and Dean Plank was the regular trombone section. It did change a little bit, but we were basically the regulars. And Jim Pugh and we were two of the players that really were crisscrossing between commercial jazz and classical.
Yes.
I thought in those days, this is in the 80s. And we, we could play Ellington music, which we did a lot in Concordia, but we could also play Samuel Barber or whoever else. That was Marianne Alsop, who's really high-level conductor now. That was her band, really.
I remember.
I think it was Leslie Stifelman playing the piano.
Yeah, she became the MD at Chicago, I think.
Right.
Broadway show. Marianne Alsop is now with Baltimore or something. She's one of the.
She's with Baltimore.
Big
Yeah.
orchestras, yeah.
And she was for a while music director at Long Island.
The Long Island Philharmonic, remember that?
Yeah, and she brought me in there, so she brought me there to play, not solo, but to play in the section. For me, music is music, so I always loved playing all the different styles. And once I became more confident with my own self as a player, then I really enjoyed doing the classical gigs more. I needed to mature enough. I didn't feel, when I was still in the Bay Area and even doing the Sacramento gig, for every concert we had, I felt like I had to do a lot of research to prepare for the concert. It's not a bad idea anyway. Right. So I listened to all the recordings of different orchestras for every, and I guess I gained my confidence there in a way, but decided not to focus on that path as a career path.
I can remember years ago when I was at New England Conservatory thinking I needed to have at least some exposure and some training in classical music and playing in the orchestra there. And then seeing the scores of Brahms or whoever where you have 150 bars of rest before you play a whole note. Right. And I was thinking to myself, all right, if this is a lot of what it's all about, and we get to play a triad after 100 bars of rest, a beautiful triad, very important in the arrangement, but I'm not sure I want to necessarily do a lot of that either myself. So, but of course, that's just one piece of music and one genre, of course. There's tons of stuff for trombone in the repertoire. But yes, you're in New York now. You've gone through the Paris years, going back to San Francisco, and you're in New York. When you came to New York, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 1980, around that time. Was there a reason you came, or I think you may have said already, because around that time you also joined the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra. Was there a connection there for coming to New York?
Well, I joined in '81, the Mel Lewis band. No, it was the same story in San Francisco. I was 28 years old, more or less, and I was playing all the best gigs in town. And I more or less always knew that I never wanted to be the best player in the band, so I knew it was time to go somewhere. And towards the end of my San Francisco days, I was playing in a rock band with Jerry Garcia. We played a lot of different kind of music, but that was from the Grateful Dead. So that was a kind of a lucrative gig where I could really stretch out and play, and I was able to save some money. And then the decision is move to LA or move to New York. And I came to New York and I stayed with a friend for 10 days, went to 3-4 clubs a night. And I think by the second day, I knew New York was my town. There was no question.
Right.
And so then I just more or less went back to San Francisco, organized myself, and prepared to move to New York. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I know the exact date, March 15th, 1980. So I moved to New York. And then I had a lot of mutual friends already in New York that I had made from different places, some in Amsterdam even, and in San Francisco. So I had a fair amount of connections. And this, in other words, I met Joe Lovano and Billy Drews and Keith O'Quinn Larry Farrell,
Yeah, the cat.
more or less in my first day in New York.
Oh, wow, marvelous.
Because my friend, a friend of mine, Harvey Wineapple, who's in the Bay Area now, but he's from New York, went to school with all these guys and was close friends with them. So he took me around, and there was a trombone player. Do you remember Mike Heathman?
Name rings a bell.
Because he was also from San Francisco, but he moved to New York, and I don't even know where he is now. But he was really helpful. He just gave me a long list. Here's who you should call. That's what he said, and he gave me a long list. The Mel Lewis band came later, but at that point I was playing a lot of sessions, just in people's houses, lofts mainly. I had a loft, so I did a lot of sessions in my loft. And I first went out with Lionel Hampton's band. This was through Larry Farrell. Actually sent me to sub, and I ended up staying in the band. And the trombone section was me and Curtis Fuller. So there I am playing with one of my heroes, really, and I did that for about a year. And then I went with Buddy Rich for a few months.
Right.
Came back to Lionel Hampton, and then joined the Mel Lewis band in September 1981. And more or less at the same time joined the Duke Ellington Orchestra.
Right, I wanted to ask about that. You've been a member of a number of illustrious bands. You just mentioned Buddy's band and Mel's band, but also the Ellington Orchestra and Gerry Mulligan's band. I mean, you've hit a lot of the great jazz orchestras of the history of the music in the trombone section, and sometimes as a contributing composer-arranger. Now, the Duke Ellington thing, I want to get back to Mel's band because you were there for quite a while. But the Duke Ellington Orchestra, for our viewers who don't necessarily know, you may know Ed is a great trombonist and composer-arranger, but he's also a specialist on the plunger mute. That's that rubber, yes, that's what it is, the thing you use in your bathroom. It's the plunger you put over the bell of the instrument to make the wah-wah effect, like people like Al Gray and Tricky Sam Nanton and people like that. So when you were in the Duke Ellington Orchestra, was it Mercer's band at that point, and how much of your ability, your prowess rather, on the plunger came into play as a soloist in the trombone section?
Well, that really came later, actually.
Oh, okay.
So when I joined the Ellington band, Art Barron was in the band.
He played
and he was the plunger.
Right.
He was the plunger soloist. I was Lawrence Brown. I was playing the first trombone, Lawrence Brown, Britt Woodman chair.
Right.
But not soon after, Art left. And so I started playing Lawrence Brown and Tricky Sam. So I started playing pretty much all the trombone solos. At the same time, in Mel's band, Jerry Dodgen wrote an arrangement called Butter.
Yeah, I know it well. It's wonderful.
And Butter has a plunger trombone solo. And we toured with Mel's band in Europe that one summer, and we played that almost every night. So I played that plunger solo, and it's kind of, I don't know if it's ironic, but it's interesting that it's Mel's band that really brought me deep into the plunger, because I was playing a plunger solo every night. And then more or less simultaneously, I got more and more plunger work with the Ellington band. So I didn't really think of it this way, but it kind of became a thing for me. And what a lot of people don't understand about, I think, music in general, but playing the plunger, because I get a lot of questions, how do you do that, or whatever. And I can say that I spent, number one, I bought every trumpet straight mute that I ever saw. If I had the money and I had a minute to go check it out, like in a music store. So I was checking out all the trumpet straight mutes as the trombone pixie, And
Let me just say that they may not know that in the audience. The sound of the Ellington trombone players, Tricky Sam Nanton and other people, they would often take a trumpet, a small metal trumpet straight mute, put it in the trombone bell, and then put the plunger over it to get that sound, that certain bright sound you have with the plunger. Right,
which is called a pixie mute, and there's actually a trombone mute that's specifically called a pixie mute,
Right. Gets the same idea. Right.
which I have and I use sometimes, but it doesn't get the textures and the colors that. Now, I ended up with a Stone Line Humensenberg trumpet straight mute, but this is after a lot of experimentation and exploration. I spent hours and hours and hours and days and weeks playing the plunger trombone, working on it at home. I didn't want to sound like the other guys. Tricky Sam was great, and the other, real great plunger soloist, Al Gray.
Right.
And I think Tyree Glenn and who else?
Butter Jackson, Quentin Jackson.
Quentin Butter Jackson.
Oh, I loved him. God,
And I was already at a place in my career that I wasn't interested in imitating. I was still interested in studying the history and the tradition, but I wanted to create my own voice with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just spent really a long time working on it and working on the possibilities. And beginning in the early 90s, I started doing a lot of solo work on my own, traveling a lot in Europe, but also in universities around the States. And at almost every concert that I played, whether I was a soloist with a big band or if it was with a quartet, I would always play one unaccompanied plunger piece, always improvised. And then maybe one or two other, usually ballads, because it's hard to play loud with the plunger. It's basically impossible with the setup that I have, especially in a big band with backgrounds and everything. But yeah, I just worked on it and just kept doing it. And one of the things that I think I'm just lucky about is that I can do the ya-ya sound.
Yeah, sure.
And I know really great trombone plunger specialists that they only can go wah-wah and they can't get ya-ya.
It requires you to actually move the whole wrist out of the way and get that big sound.
Well, and it's a little bit vowel sounds, ya-ya. I mean, for me, I'm kind of doing that. And I get this question a lot, how do you do the ya-ya? Interestingly, I don't hear it that way unless I record myself or I listen back to a recording.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm playing, I don't hear ya-ya. I just hear, because we're hearing ourselves kind of from inside. So it just happened naturally for me, the whole ya-ya thing. But I use flutter tongue a lot. Sometimes I sing with it.
The trombone can be extremely vocal. I mean, not just the ya-ya of the plunger, but the flutter tongue, the multi-pitch thing you can get by singing while you play. I mean, many people equate the trombone to being the most vocal sounding of all the wind instruments. I don't know, maybe because of the slide, and we can have a pure glissando the way other instruments cannot. The size of the bell, the sound of the instrument, and of course the use of the plunger. There's so many connections to the human quality of expressing and vocal stuff. Yeah.
And my influences, I was going back to my Circle Star Theater days, where I could sit and look and listen to and watch Sarah Vaughan every night for 5 nights in a row.
Right.
And Frank Sinatra and Nancy Wilson and all the great singers. I mean, those are kind of my favorites right there, but I was with all of them. And the gig was great. It was Westbury Music Fair?
Oh yeah, I used to play there a lot. I know exactly that whole scene. I know.
So Circle Star Theater was the same layout. It was designed by the same architect, I'm sure.
A circle. Yeah.
So the stage is in the middle,
right,
and the band is facing the stage. So the pit is facing the stage, so you can watch.
Right.
And I just, also Aretha Franklin, we played a lot with her. So I would say, for me, and this is what I recommend to my students all the time, listen to singers.
Yeah, man.
And even you go back to Tommy Dorsey and Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra got his phrasing from Tommy Dorsey,
Mm-hmm.
and then horn players got their phrasing from Frank Sinatra. So it's been like this for forever, basically.
Yeah. One of my favorite people in the whole wide world as an artist, and it's a bit old school, is Jack Teagarden. And when Jack will sing a song and then pick the bone up and just play the melody right after he sang it, it's just to me like that is like one of the perfect singing to playing, boom, connects. Or Rossellino, with all that.
Also, right? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Lots of meatballs.
Yeah.
Doing all that crazy scatting too, man. Well, now the thing is, that's a lot about your prowess on trombone. I mean, you're really an established trombonist, both in the United States and in Europe and in multiple scenes. But you are really, at this point in your career, it seems to me, equally respected as a composer arranger. And I'd love to hear about when that became more a part of your life and when the importance of your artistry as an identity as Ed Neumeister, beyond being a fine expressive jazz trombonist, someone who put pen to paper in a serious manner. And I know you and I actually, just so the audience knows, we were both members in 1988 through 1990, members of the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop, which was headed up by Bob Rickmeyer and Manny Album and put together by Bert Corral with BMI. And that was the first year it ever ran. And, clearly you were one of the people that was already along the way with some of Bob's thinking. And I was always feeling like I was catching up at the time, as some of us else did as well. I'm not sure where you were at that point with your writing or before that, but clearly you're an established composer arranger as well as a jazz trombonist. Can you kind of talk a little bit about maybe some of the impetus, the things that moved you in that direction to become more active as a composer arranger?
Well, I would have just said exactly what you just said. When I joined Mel's band, Bob Brookmeyer was the music director. So I got close with Bob already from Mel's band.
Right.
And then, but all my life I've been composing and arranging.
Okay.
So even when I was a teenager, I would write the horn charts for these, we call them horn bands in those days, but kind of coming from Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Right, sure.
There were several Bay Area bands, one band called Cold Blood, and another band called The Loading Zone, which were quite big in those late 60s, early 70s. And so I wrote the horn charts. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just used common sense, in a way. And I could really write, I wrote out the charts at the rehearsal sometimes because the band would learn a tune. Then I would just take a few minutes and I'd jot out the parts for the rest of the horn players and just do it pencil paper. And Mel was very encouraging about us bringing in charts. So I started bringing in charts almost right away. And in those days, we did 3 sets a night. So the third set was 1 o'clock in the morning, which never started on time. And we would read through read through things on the third set. So I brought in several charts. Sometimes we just play it once, and then I kind of listened and took it away. And then when Bob started Bob and Manny and Bert Corral started that Jazz Composers Workshop, they asked all of us if we were interested, and I was like, yeah, sign me up. And it was really through that experience, through the BMI thing. So you were there.
Yep.
That's when I basically morphed from a trombone player who composes into a composer whose instrument is a trombone.
Interesting.
So It was really through influence of Bob and Manny, they both became really close. Manny was a neighbor, so we were hanging out a lot. He's Jewish, so he'd have Christmas dinner at our house several years. He lived in Croton. That's where I lived at the time, in Croton-on-Hudson, Westchester. And I was seeing my friends, colleagues going to Europe and doing projects in Europe. So Brookmeyer, of course, and Lovano, Kenny Warner, Jim McNeely, they were all going to Europe to do projects as composers and as players. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there at the Vanguard going, I want to do that, But I didn't really have any connections in Europe, not really. until one day, Monday night, we played one or two of my arrangements, and I had a few solos. And you know, in a big band, it's rare you have a few solos. It's lucky if you get one in a set. And a big band leader from Denmark came up to me on the break and said, "If you are ever in Europe, I'd love for you to be a guest with my band." So I went home that night and I just flipped the calendar ahead 6 months and I said, I'm going to be in Europe. And I just decided, and then I sent him I think a letter in those days, you know, a post saying I'm planning to be in Europe, so if you still want to do something, that would be great. So he booked me for 3 days, and then I asked for recommendations and of other people to contact, and he gave me some also other people to contact, and I had, let's just say, some loose connections all around Europe. So I parlayed that first trip into a 3-week tour. It was Paris to Helsinki to Austria, Germany, Switzerland. It was all over the place. And that was the beginning of my European solo experience.
Right, because so now this is morphing into a chapter of your life where you end up as the professor of jazz trombone at the Conservatory in Graz, Austria, which, I mean, I know there's a number of programs in Europe. I would never want to disparage any of those other programs, but to my mind, the Graz program is full of a lot of heavyweights, and it's a really super fine jazz studies program in Europe. Because you spent how many years were you there, Ed? We just said.
I was there a total of 17 years.
So you're there quite a while. And
Yeah.
it's a really fine program, so I'm sure you felt good about the students and...
Well, it's the oldest jazz, it's actually a university now. It was what's called, when I joined, it was called a Hochschule, which literally translates into high school, but it doesn't mean the same. So more of a conservatory, but it's still at the university level. And then more or less the next year, or just after I started there, turned into a university. University of the Performing Arts is called. And yeah, it was a great experience. It's a great gig. And I think the reputation and the level of the school has really come up, not because of me, but since I was there. There was a lot of older professors that have been there kind of forever, and they were students there and didn't really have a world view. But now, you know, there's Jim Rotundi's there, and Dina DeRose is there.
Right.
And drum professors, Howard Curtis, he's from the Washington, D.C. area, and also some great German musicians, some who went to school there, others that came in as professors later. And it is a great school. It was a great experience for me. But I have to say, when that thing ended, I thought about 10 seconds before I said, okay, time to get back to New York.
Right. It's kind of the center of everything is here, actually.
Yeah.
Wow, well, that's tremendous. I had some experience with the Austrian people myself in Vienna. Did you get to be a little bit involved in the scene in Vienna, or did Graz have its own scene, or both of those places? And just as far as playing gigs and musicians, or was Austria kind of a jumping off point for you to do other things in Europe as well?
Yeah, I consciously moved there as a soloist, composer, conductor. So I was offered some gigs, even at the what was it called, the Vienna Art Orchestra, and a few other things. And I was really picky who I would play with. So I was really focusing on my own thing, and I definitely didn't want to be in a European big band. I felt like I played in the best bands in the world, and it just didn't feel right for me to kind of do that. So I wasn't on the scene, really. I was there as a soloist. There are some players there that I played with, a guitarist named Karl Ratzer, who I still play with, and a great pianist, Fritz Power.
Oh, yeah, I knew Fritz. Yeah, he was wonderful, a real shining star of Vienna.
So
Beautiful.
he played in my quartet. We did a lot of projects
Marvelous.
together. He was fantastic. Um, and beyond that, I I guess like Phil Woods came on tour and I went out with him. Did some gigs with Liebman, Jim McNeely. So my friends, colleagues from the States would come and did a few little hits. If I dug the music, that sounds maybe too.
No, no, but I mean, just like the scene in Vienna, like the Porgy and Bess Club or the Jazz Land, or those big clubs. I'm not sure what they have in Graz, but
Graz is more of a student scene, but I would play there with my own bands. Porgy and Bess, I would play with my own group once or twice a year, and I would play with the Carl Rotzer group or Fritz Powers group.
yeah, yeah.
In Graz, there was a couple clubs that I would play, but somehow I was always a leader. And at one point, me and Don Menza was there for a while, for a semester, so
Oh,
we
yeah,
had
the sax player, yeah.
we had a steady gig, actually, one night a week at this Stockwerk Jazz Club in Graz. So we call it bowling night. We just played tunes. We never rehearsed or anything. And that was fun.
Funny.
But as far as being on the European scene, for better or worse, really, because I was playing a lot less on account of that. In New York, I was freelancing, doing everything.
Were you asked to perform with other bands around Europe at that point? Was that like a launching off point to go to other countries too?
But that had already been kind of ongoing. So I had ongoing relationships, and then a few others developed. But so I played regularly or conducted and played with the Budapest Jazz Orchestra. So that was several projects a year usually. The Umo band in Helsinki, Finland. I did a bunch of projects with the Metropole Radio Orchestra.
They're marvelous, yeah.
Even the Belgium Radio Orchestra doesn't exist anymore. Frankfurt Radio, Hamburg Radio. So I was more featured as a soloist, composer, and conductor with the different European bands.
It's wonderful that these European countries, perhaps it's more of a liberal agenda, if you will, sponsor radio orchestras. That they're paid by, I think they're paid by the state. I can't answer that. You know more than I would about that. But they're sponsored by the state sometimes, like particularly in Germany, like you said, Frankfurt, and then maybe the WDR. I don't know what the WDR, if it's sponsored by the government or not.
Well, they definitely are. Yeah.
And that's a different head, for a society to sponsor a jazz orchestra.
Right.
And with the irony is really jazz is an American art form, and yet these other countries are sponsoring jazz orchestras, whereas America's so about make it on your own and good luck to you kind of thing, and everybody's kind of fighting in a lot of ways to keep the music alive. It's refreshing that other countries will value the art form so much that they will have their government sponsor a jazz orchestra, which is an American art form. I find that kind of ironic in a way, but
all these bands started out as dance bands. That's how they started, really. So they light music orchestras, and they evolved into jazz bands. Now, the WDR, they're in Cologne. I don't know the history so much of that band. But the other bands in Frankfurt and I think in Hamburg, and there used to be one in Stuttgart, and even Metropole in Holland started out as for light music orchestras. And even the first time I went there, I just played standard tunes. I mean, it was a great experience. I just showed up, and the arrangements at that time were done for me. I picked the tunes. I just showed up and played, Stardust with the string orchestra,
And the arrangements were done too, right? I want to grab a little more information about what's happening now since you've returned. Of course, you're now on our faculty. I think you might be teaching elsewhere, but you're with us, and I'm really proud of that fact because just so the audience knows, for many, many years in the graduate composing arranging department of our jazz program, we had Jim McNeely as our principal composition arranging teacher for the graduate students. and he left us a couple of years ago. And the only person I could think of really to replace Jim was Ed Neumeister, in terms of gravitas as a composer arranger, someone who's forward thinking, especially for our more advanced students. And I can't tell you how happy I am you said yes to this thing, because Jim is a world-renowned composer arranger, and to fill his very big shoes is not a easy task. So you really were the it person, and I'm so grateful that you're on board with this. So since you've returned, besides teaching with us, and of course this afternoon, in a very short period of time, you're going to be at 4 o'clock today, you'll be performing with a quintet of musicians. Can you talk a little bit about your work with the vocalist that you will hear today, Jay Clayton? I know you have a history with her, and I know she has her own history as a jazz artist, but the front line of this quintet is you as trombonist and Jay Clayton as a woman, Jay Clayton as the vocalist. And you want to just kind of expound a little bit about the music that you've prepared for us to hear today.
Well, Jay and I have been playing together. She was in Graz as well.
Okay.
Along with Fritz Power. And they were playing a gig. This is in early 2000s, I think. Might have been even before I was a full-time professor, but I was coming as a guest regularly. And Jay was playing a concert in Graz, and she invited me to sit in by the recommendation of Fritz Power, who was playing in a group. And I sat in with the band, and then she just said, "Stay up here, this feels good," you know. And usually when you sit in, it's for a tune or two, you know, but I ended up playing the whole gig. And so we hooked up right away. And then we started doing trio concerts together with Fritz Power. And there's actually a recording that just was released just a week ago. That is Fritz Power, Jay Clayton, and myself. And Jay and I have been playing with different situations together ever since. So the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. And we played duos, trios, Jerry Gurnelli sometimes, different players, also with Fritz. And we did this recording back in, this was actually early in 2000, I think. And it just sat there in the can, so to speak. And I have my own record label, so I talked to Jay about releasing it. It's too good to just have it sitting in the closet, you know. So that's the new record. And so the concert this afternoon is a result of the CD coming out, playing together with Jay. It's a little bit different situation because it is a quintet. And Jay and I, as hopefully everybody will hear, we have a great relationship that we just trust each other, and we hook up. Let's just say we hook up right away. We always have, and it just always feels great. So I wanted to invite her to join us. You know, originally when we talked about it, it was going to be a quartet. And I thought, let's bring Jay in too, because of the recording, but also because she is not well known enough, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So any little thing I can do to help raise her profile, especially at this stage in her career. She moved to New York in 1962.
She's been on the map for a little while.
So
yeah.
She just celebrated her 79th birthday, or will celebrate or something. And what's great about all these players that I play with is we can play a standard tune right down the middle, straight ahead, swing. It's all cool. We can go out, we can go in between, we can go upside down, and it all feels good.
Mm-hmm. And just a combination of a trombone and a woman's voice. And from what I know about Jay, she the range of her voice is sort of between alto and soprano. She's kind of in that sweet spot for the alto, and that combination with a B flat tenor trombone, just in terms of you guys playing together, has a certain sound together. It's not like you're playing baritone sax and she's a soprano and like the range is like this, huge gulf.
Right.
You can do things together when you perform together where the sounds mesh. And I think I've heard the two of you perform a bit together, so I know what that sound is like. It's like that. It's part of also the history. Many of the people who are watching might think about, singer horn player partnerships throughout history. Billie Holiday and Lester Young and Astro Gilberto and Stan Getz and
Right.
I don't know about a lot of trombone players. Abbey Lincoln and J.J. Johnson, they did a couple things together, and I found that very enjoyable. Oh, but Brookmeyer too. Brookmeyer and Carol Sloan, just this wonderful melting of a human voice with a trombone.
Yeah.
Because we got such a warm, as trombone players, that warm human vocal kind of sound. It's a great combination, like the tenor saxophone with a voice too. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy that as much as you'll enjoy any of the things, folks, you hear today, whether it's composing or improvising or whatever. This wonderful partnership musically between Jay's voice as a singer and Ed's voice, quote unquote, as a trombonist. I think that's a special thing you're going to want to check out. And lastly, Ed, you do lead your own large ensembles and have made recordings with your own jazz orchestras and made recordings of your own composition arrangements. You want to talk a little bit about that? We're going to close up shop in about 3 or 4 minutes here, but you have a few records out as a leader of your own jazz orchestras.
Yeah, I can think of 3 right now. There might be others. In Austria, I did a record with a local big band called the Jazz Big Band Graz. They played with Fritz Powers on piano, John Hollenbeck on drums. We did the music, a CD, an album of my music. And then I composed, also through the Graz connection, I composed a cello concerto for cello and big band. And that was recorded with the same orchestra and an Austrian cellist. He's the one that actually commissioned it. That was a lot of fun. So that was jazz without improvisation, or there was no swing in it, no ding, ding, a ding, ding, a ding. But I got to compose all his solos. He wasn't an improviser. So I got to, and one of my first drafts I sent to him, he sent it back and said, "It's not virtuosic enough." I said, "Okay, watch out now."
This person played with one of the major orchestras or something. Sounds like a real heavyweight cellist or something.
And then a few years ago in New York, I recorded my New Hat Ensemble, and that's been out a few years. That's all my original music. And I'm actually, just before the coronavirus lockdown, I'm starting yet another jazz orchestra, and this is called Assemblage, and I'm really trying to put together a super diverse orchestra with a lot of women, a lot of people of color, just the whole spectrum. And I'm finding that, just observing bands sort of are mono everything, They're either this or that with a few token this or that, So I'm trying to really mix it up. And we did already a couple of rehearsals, and then the virus kicked in. So, but that's my next jazz orchestra project that'll be coming whenever we can start playing live music again.
Oh gosh, well that's got to be soon enough. You got to believe. I think the human spirit won't give up on that. Let's just the clubs and the venues don't give up on us either, because everything's about money. So much is about money in this country that unless someone's going to help out, incredibly important venues like the Vanguard or something, that you got to believe someone's going to step up for a place like that. You must believe that, because if that's not going to happen, we're in some trouble. But I'm hopeful. I believe you are too. I hope you are.
Yeah.
I hope you are too in the audience, that you're here today virtually. You're not here at the Shea Center like you normally would be. you're virtually going to be seeing Ed and his quintet at 4 o'clock today. And but it's as if you're with us, you know, because it is still on our stage at the Shea Center for the Performing Arts. And you will be here in those seats again soon enough. But we have not stopped. We're making this work, and we do have a little help from the NEA, believe it or not. Believe that or not, in this day and age, the NEA helping art people out, but they kicked in some money, which we're grateful for. And they're helping us to do the live stream with the camera work, which is an additional expense. So we can make this go on no matter what, because otherwise we'd be in a little bit of trouble. So miracles do happen every day, you know, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm going to probably sign off here now, so folks, you can get ready for the 4 o'clock hit. And I want to thank this wonderful gentleman, this tremendous artist who you're going to hear in a few minutes, Mr. Ed Neumeister. I want you to enjoy him, his band, his playing, his composing, and his entire group. And Ed, it's been a real pleasure. I've known you for years, but not in the context here in Sittin' In. So I had a ball, and I learned a lot. And thank you so much for performing and talking today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Enjoy.
Enjoy the concert, folks.
All right.
Bye-bye.